Some say transparency, some say a humble brag, and others will tell you that I'm just making this video for views so I can get internet clout to talk about my 7-figure real estate portfolio that took me roughly 5 years to create. What's up guys, my name's Avery. I'm a real estate agent and investor in the Raleigh-Durham area of North Carolina, and in today's video I'm going to go over all of the properties that I own, how I purchased them, and what their estimated value versus what I owe on them so you can get a total understanding of what my rental property portfolio equity would be. And today is November 13th when I'm filming this. I don't know how long it will take to actually get edited and publish, but I bought my first ever property in March of 2019, so it's almost been 5 years, and it's kind of cool to think of the growth that I've had over that time. Straight into it, but first I'd appreciate it if you would scroll down and make that thumbs up button blue, because it would make me very happy. So that first property that I ever purchased back in March of 2019 was a duplex in Everett, Massachusetts, and I purchased it for $525,000. This property I was able to acquire, and I utilized a strategy called house hacking that I've talked about a lot on this channel, but if you've not heard about it, essentially you just buy a property, a single family residential home, a 1 to 4 unit building. In my case, I bought a 2-unit building and I lived in part of it and I rented out the other. Now with a duplex, this is easy to understand because you live in one unit, you rent out the other, and then theoretically all of the rent that you're receiving covers your mortgage and all of your other expenses. In my case, I was able to cover all of my mortgage and a good chunk of my expenses because I had a roommate, my then girlfriend, now fiance, as well as another tenant in the other unit covering a lot of that money. Like I said, I purchased that property for $525,000. I used an FHA loan so I could put 3.5% down, and I had the seller pay a majority of those closing costs so I could keep more money in my pocket because I had to do some renovations, and I also had to learn how to do a lot of those renovations myself because I did not nearly have enough money to pay people to do that work. Today that property is worth roughly $850,000, and today I'm going to go over all of the values that I believe the properties are worth, and this is all estimated. Obviously when you sell a property there are realtor fees and other associated costs, and it could sell for less or more, so this is just an estimate. So that's $850,000 that it is most likely going to be able to sell for, and I owe roughly $480,000 on the loan. So that is a pretty substantial chunk of equity that I was able to create over roughly 4.5–5 years of owning this property. Of course, I've done some work. I've upgraded major mechanical systems, the roof, recently redid some steps, also did a good amount of cosmetic work when I first purchased the property. Some of it not super great because I was DIYing and learning how to do that myself. But over time, this has been a fantastic property and it cash flows really well. So I do plan on holding this one for a very long time. And a lot of that equity, other than being created by forced equity for me doing a lot of great improvements to the home, has obviously been created by market appreciation. Yes, over the last few years, there's been some crazy market appreciation just because of the entirety of the real estate market, but also I purchased in a fantastic location in the Boston area where there's been a lot of rapid growth. A lot more young professionals are wanting to live there now. It was a city in transition, and there's also some great things coming to the area. Recently, there was a casino that was built there a few years ago, and now they're talking about putting in the New England Revolution Stadium right there in the town. So it is really poised for a lot of growth. You see a lot of development and great things happening in that town. Property number 2, that is also a house hack that I purchased with an FHA loan because with my first property, I refinanced out of the FHA loan so that I could utilize it again because for the most part, you can only have one of those in your name at a time. There are a few other reasons why you can have more than one, but for the most part, you're only going to be able to have one of those FHA loans. But in this case, instead of buying a duplex, I bought a triplex. I purchased this one in May of 2020, which was a very interesting time because COVID hit the United States in March of 2020. So that's pretty much when I started looking because that's when I refinanced my other property and wanted to start looking. And then that was also a time when people were really nervous about going outside in general, but even to look at property. So I thought it was a great opportunity for a buyer like me who wasn't as desirable to a seller to go look at properties, get myself in, and also get an incredibly low interest rate. So I purchased that property for $678,000 in May of 2020. I also, again, received an $8,000 closing credit, which covered almost all of my closing costs to keep more money in my pocket so I could spend on some renovations. And this property was really great because it passed the FHA self-sufficiency test, which can be difficult to pass in today's environment. So the FHA self-sufficiency test is for 3 and 4 unit buildings. If you have a duplex or below, doesn't matter. But essentially it just says that over the entirety of the building, however much gross rent that you're receiving, if you multiply that number by 75%, that has to be greater than or equal to the mortgage. For example, if you received $1,000 in rent over all 3 units and the mortgage was $600, then 75% of that $1,000 is $750, which is greater than your $600 mortgage. Now again, that's a much more difficult test to pass in today's environment. Lucky for you though, they just came out with the conventional loan allowing you to put 5% down, and it does not need a self-sufficiency test. So if you want to learn more about that one, you can check it out. I think up here is the right spot that I'm pointing. Could be there. I'll link it somewhere so that you can learn more about that product. This property was the same thing for me. I house hacked it, 3.5% down. Didn't have to put that much money into it, and it's had really significant return because it's still in that same great town. And while I lived there, I completely lived for free, which was absolutely awesome. So today that property is worth roughly $925,000. And because it was a sizable loan with only a 2.75% interest rate, I have been able to pay down, or my tenants have been able to pay down a good chunk of that original loan. So I owe roughly $615,000 or $620,000 on that property. Next, in year 3, I moved down to the Raleigh, Durham area, specifically in Durham where I live today, and I purchased a single family property that also had a detached garage, and this one is a quasi house hack, but it is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath property, and I currently use one of the bedrooms as my YouTube studio, which is how you're seeing me today. So I purchased that property for $345,000, and I ended up buying in one of the hottest, best zip codes in all of Durham without kind of realizing it. I knew it was a good area, but I didn't realize it was the most desirable, or seemingly the most desirable neighborhood in downtown Durham. This property, even if I did absolutely no renovations to it, would have gotten pretty good appreciation. Probably would be worth about $450,000 if I did nothing. I would say today, with the renovations that have been done, it's probably closer to the 500 mark. And then I also have this detached garage. If you've been seeing some of my other videos, that I'm turning into an ADU. That'll be a fairly expensive project, probably about $180,000. I got a HELOC on the equity that I have in the main home in order to pay for that. Plus I have some other money saved up. So that project hopefully will start at the beginning of 2024. This property does not cash flow for me today because I live here, but once I'm able to get that garage up and running, it will create a solid amount of equity, and then I will get decent cash flow from that ADU that will help me pay for a lot of the expenses associated with owning this property. And now once all of that is said and done and everything is completed with the ADU, this property will be worth somewhere around $675,000, maybe $700,000. Now I fast forward into 2022 where I purchased 2 properties. The first one being a single family Airbnb that I purchased in Pinehurst, North Carolina, and I actually just sold that property. I purchased this property with a 10% down second home loan. The first 3 properties I bought were all between 3 to 5% down, but because this was no longer an owner-occupied loan, I had to put more money down. Although 10% is not very high considering a conventional investment loan is typically 20%. So because it's a second home loan, that did mean that I had to stay at the property from time to time, but I was allowed to Airbnb it in the interim. And staying at it from time to time roughly meant about 2 weeks, and that's about how long it took me to set up everything and all of those night stays that I took when it was the weekends and I was setting up furniture and all that stuff. Now this property I had planned to own for a very long time, and if you want to learn more about why I sold it, I'll also put that video in the description. Recently made that and ended up selling for a variety of reasons, but I was able to cash out of that and hopefully do more projects in the area that I'm in. So that property I purchased for $405,000 with a $5,000 closing credit, similar to all the other properties that I purchased with some type of closing credit. And then I was able to sell it for $530,100, and that included the furniture. I spent about $50,000 on renovations, $25,000 on furniture, so I made a roughly 25% return after owning that property for about 18 months. And I also am now a realtor, and that happened a few months ago, and that was the first property I sold, so I was able to save a lot of money on those fees that you would normally pay. Later that year, I purchased a 4-unit building in Durham, North Carolina, and this was the first time that I purchased a property with partners. I did not bring any money to the table, but I brought my knowledge, and I also brought the deal, and I do manage the property. So I own a small portion of the property. I do not own the whole property, and it was purchased for $549,000. Not a ton of work has been put into this building. We have done a lot of exterior maintenance, did a lot of work in the basement, and by a lot I just mean some waterproofing, making sure that it was more sound because there are a lot of water issues in the Durham area, so we wanted those to go away or at least help them from getting worse. That property today is probably worth somewhere between $625,000 and $650,000, and again, I am not a sole majority owner in this property, I am just a part owner. And to round out my rental property portfolio, in January of this year, 2023, I purchased purchased my second Airbnb, which is a really awesome cabin about 30 minutes away from here. Super secluded, awesome Airbnb that people love to stay at, and I purchased that one for $290,000. Now this is a 2-bed, 1-bath, and again, I put it on Airbnb. When I purchased it, there was no real outdoor amenities. Cut down a few trees, added some awesome hardscaping in the backyard with a hot tub and a fire pit, and now it's a really amazing glamping stay, and I plan on taking those proceeds from my single-family Pinehurst property, and because it's on a 5-acre plot of land, I can add a tiny home and eventually maybe a treehouse or other things to make this a really cool getaway area for a lot of people. And I really do like this property, even though I prefer long-term rentals over short-term rentals purely because of the time aspect. But this one does very well and cash flows pretty well, and I get a ton of awesome 5-star reviews and people really like it, and it's just been pretty fun to own. So that's it. That's my entire rental property portfolio, and I don't do math live, even though I have it written down somewhere what the amount of equity that I have in each of these properties, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. So if you want to comment down below what all of those numbers add up to, that would be awesome. I also want to say that I'm not really aggressively buying a bunch of property. I'm not going into crazy amounts of debt. I have pretty solid equity in each property. I also have about $50,000 in reserves set up across all of these properties that I won't be using for new ventures. I obviously have money to be able to pay for the HELOC as well as the tiny home that I'm planning on putting in, but I am being a bit more defensive with my rental property portfolio today because who knows what's going to happen. Also, interest rates are pretty high, so I'm not just going to go out buying anything, and it doesn't work the same way that it did a few years ago. All that is to say though, if you just end up buying 1 or 2 properties every single year for the course of 5 or 10 years, you can easily replace what your job may have and create yourself a decent bit of cash flow so that you could retire on that or have more freedom with your choices in life, so you can do what you want rather than having to work that job hoping that you don't get fired, and instead take some risks and do some things that you want, knowing that if you fail with that, you can fall back on the real estate. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video, appreciated the transparency, clout, humble brag, however you want to call it. And if you did, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button. And if you're looking in the Raleigh-Durham area of North Carolina or the whole triangle, I'd be happy to help you out. I've helped a few people out from this YouTube channel, which is really cool to know that people actually watch this and reach out to me. Have something in the description below if you want to see how you can reach out to me so I can help you. So definitely do that. And don't forget to like the video if you haven't already done so. And thanks again for watching, and more wealth is coming your way.